Hello everyone. Have you got an idea for an amazing project that will have huge positive impact on your beneficiaries? Perhaps you want to share your ideas with your donors or supporters about why your project will succeed. Let's find out why a theory of change is for you. Hello everyone, I'm Louise from the Social Strategy Cafe and it's lovely to have you here. This channel provides tools and tips for strategically developing your nonprofit. So it doesn't matter if you're working for an NGO, if you're developing a social enterprise, or you're running a charity. So you may have heard of a theory of change, but what exactly is it? And why should you use it when developing your projects? Grab yourself a cuppa and let's take a look. The theory of change will tell someone on just one page the thinking around your project. So for example, how you will get from point A, which is where you are now, to point B, which is at some future time. So say you have a group of beneficiaries, perhaps they're living in poverty and they're at point A right now, but you want to get them to point B, where they're no longer living in poverty. They've sustainably improved their income. The area in the middle between point A and point B is your project and how you are proposing to help your beneficiaries get from one point to the other. So your theory of change offers a causal pathway between one set of circumstances and the change you want to see happen. The theory of change explains logically to someone who perhaps knows nothing about your beneficiaries or their circumstances, but your theory of change will explain why your method, why your project will work. So where did the theory of change come from? The theory of change model originated in the 1990s from the work of the Aspen Institute, the Round Table on Community Change in the United States. These researchers were keen on helping organisations improve their outcomes and explain clearly the causal link between their projects and their vision. I'll put a link in the description box to the research paper for those of you who are interested. What is useful about the theory of change is that the method helps you to shift from perhaps a very broad mission of, for example, reducing childhood poverty, to working backwards from your aim and breaking this goal into more specific steps and metrics which allow you to demonstrate progress towards this goal. So why should you create a theory of change? Creating change through a charitable project is difficult. We all know that, right? Sometimes we have a great idea for a project and then we implement it, if we're lucky enough to get the funding to do so. But the results are not exactly as we anticipated. There may be unintended consequences, or we may not have considered a particular stakeholder's views, or something may have changed in our operating environment which impacted on our results. A theory of change tries to take many of these things into account in the project planning process. In the best case scenario, you would involve your beneficiaries, your stakeholders and partners at this planning stage so that you can ensure that all the different views and assumptions can be tackled early on, and a consensus can be reached before the project moves further into planning and implementation. The theory of change also helps to align everyone to the same vision or goal so that all of your stakeholders know what you are trying to achieve. Once you have gone through this collaborative process, the theory of change creates this visual project plan on a page so that you can share it with anyone involved or potential donors. Sharing the process of how you created the theory of change will also give potential funders confidence that you are working together with your beneficiaries and your stakeholders, which will mean the project is much more likely to achieve the goals that you are predicting. In addition, the theory of change offers you a framework for monitoring and evaluation. There are many different versions of the theory of change model. and several approaches to developing one. So make sure you pick an approach with the detail that works for your organisation and your context. Just as an aside, the United Nations Development Group recommends 3 principles when developing a theory of change. Number 1, it should be developed consultatively to reflect the understanding of all the relevant stakeholders. Number 2, it should be grounded in, tested with, and revised based on robust evidence at all stages. And number 3, it should support continuous learning and improvement from program design to closure. So how do you go about completing a theory of change? And does it have to be complicated? So no, it doesn't have to be complicated. If you want to become an expert, you can take courses and you can find them online. But if you are from a small, maybe a medium-sized organisation, and you only want to create a theory of change for a particular project, rather than your entire organisation, then you don't have to worry about creating a high-level theory of change. BOND, the infrastructure organisation for international development organisations in the UK, recommends 3 stages to developing a theory of change for your organisation: preparation, participation, and implementation. Although their approach relates to an organisational theory of change, this is still sensible advice. And if you want more detail, I'll put a link to their theory of change learning paper below. Let's just briefly look at these 3 steps. Number 1, BOND recommends that at the preparation stage, you should review your existing work, agree what your stakeholder engagement will be, and then agree what your project purpose will be and its objective. Number 2, the middle stage is the participation of your stakeholders. You should include a wide variety of stakeholders, both internal and external to your organisation, as well as your beneficiaries and any partners that you intend to work with. The final stage is implementation. The most important part of this is that you have a form of a feedback loop embedded into your project. This means you can adapt your approach if you need to. Say your results are not exactly as positive as you would like. Perhaps you had forgotten to take something into account, or maybe your external environment has changed as you have implemented your project. You can check what's working and what's not, and you can adapt your approach depending on the results. Using a feedback loop process will help you tweak and adjust your project as time goes on. Let's now look at the process of creating a simple theory of change using an example project. Step 1 is to set a deadline, but make sure that you leave plenty of time to engage your stakeholders, both individually and as a group. Now let's start thinking about your beneficiaries. Who are they? What is the context in which they're living? And what are the problems that they face? Let's just imagine here that you work in a rural area where children lack access to books, computers, and educational support. What is your experience of working with these beneficiaries? And what has worked or been positive for them in the past? What is a realistic vision for your project? What would success look like to you and your beneficiaries? Perhaps children living in rural areas have improved academic performance. They complete high school education and they have improved livelihoods. Now you need to work backwards from this vision and decide what activity or activities would lead to these outcomes. What from your own experience has worked in the past? What do your beneficiaries, your stakeholders, or your partners think would work? And what evidence do you have that these activities will? Perhaps providing improved access to textbooks and reading books, computers, and volunteer educational tutors would improve their outcomes. Perhaps providing additional after-school clubs could be beneficial, such as science clubs or coding clubs. Perhaps providing educational packs to rural children Free lunches and improving sanitary conditions in schools would encourage children, particularly girls, to attend. You can now think about the short, medium and long-term outcomes that you can measure to determine whether you're going to hit your final vision. You need to think of indicators that you can easily measure, such as the children's academic performance, so that you can see progression over time. Short-term outcomes could be around reading and writing skills. Medium-term outcomes could be around improvements in reading skills, aspiration levels, or the numbers of children achieving certain levels of qualifications. Long-term outcomes could be increased numbers of children graduating high school or college, and improvements in the children's household income levels and livelihoods. You can now start to see the logical sequence. Now you can add detail about inputs and outputs. Inputs could be textbooks, volunteer trainers, reading books, educational materials, computers, internet access, and so on. Now, what about outputs? What outputs would you expect? Think about the numbers and levels of success, the numbers of children completing each academic year, the numbers of children who have improved their academic performance or gained certain qualifications, the numbers of girls completing secondary school. You can then add any conditions of success. For example, have you made any assumptions in your project planning, and what might hinder your success? Are there any external conditions that could cause a problem for your project? These could be around whether your region remains politically stable and that you're able to recruit a sufficient number of volunteer tutors, or perhaps that the parents will support the academic initiative. So now we've got quite a good complete theory of change, just as an example. And there are many different designs of theories of change online. Let's just take a look at a few here. Here's one offered by Clinks, and Clinks is an infrastructure charity in the UK. And they start their theory of change process by using a planning triangle. There are 3 stages in their process: activities, outcomes, and final goals. Clinks recommends that you fill in more details once you've completed these 3 steps. They also recommend developing a written form of your theory of change, which allows you to add detail about your experience, your assumptions, and to tell a story about your project. Here is a theory of change created by the Duke of Edinburgh Award. This is a qualification that young people achieve through a series of tasks, which includes physical and academic challenges and volunteering in their communities. You can see that the theory of change is not complex. It is, in effect, just a list. This theory of change is produced by the Rotary in Nigeria, with their final outcome of reducing maternal and neonatal mortality. Finally, here is a high-level theory of change created by UNICEF. But you can see in all of the theory of change examples that there are common threads in all of them. They all demonstrate a process towards their final goal. So you don't need to worry about making your theory of change too complicated. Most funders just want to understand your thinking, to know that you've consulted with your stakeholders and your beneficiaries, and to be reassured that your project is based on evidence and logic. They want to know the story behind your theory of change. So I suggest you write a short narrative that goes along with your diagram. Finally, let's quickly touch on how you can begin your theory of change process. How do you start? So now let's think that you're in your preparation stage and you will need to undertake research of similar projects and their outcomes. What are the issues that have been faced by other organisations offering similar services? Is there an evidence base of this type of project working for this target group? Next, you need to think about your stakeholders and who you are going to engage. In your participation stage, you need to think how you will engage your stakeholders and your beneficiaries, or their families, perhaps if they're very young. Make sure you use methods that work for your organisation and your context. So just a few suggestions. You could divide up some questions amongst your trustees or senior managers for them to interview your stakeholders and bring back the information to you so that you can compile the results. You could also train up some beneficiaries to go and interview other beneficiaries or even some stakeholders so that they can then bring that information back to you and you can compile those results. Questions you could ask your stakeholders: what vision do you think we should aim to achieve? What is the most important problem that our beneficiaries experience? What areas do you think we could be the most impactful? What challenges do you think we will face in achieving our goals? Questions you could ask your beneficiaries: what would you most like to achieve? What is the biggest challenge you have to achieving this goal? How can we best help you meet your ambitions? These results can then be circulated and shared so that your senior managers can then be tasked with bringing some project ideas and outcome ideas to your Theory of Change workshop. Alternatively, they can forward all their information to you so that you can draft some example Theory of Change charts for people to fine-tune in your meetings. Now you need to hold one or more Theories of Change workshops. You may want to invite all your stakeholders to these workshops, or you may just want to rely on the responses that they've already given. That's entirely up to you. Once you've drafted your Theory of Change and you've been successful in achieving some funding to go towards your project, remember, once you're at the implementation stage, you should continue to engage your stakeholders and your beneficiaries. This should be through a feedback loop process. A feedback loop process enables you to keep checking with your beneficiaries in case there's anything that you need to tweak about your project. Perhaps you're running something on the wrong day, or you need to change the timing of something. And it's only through speaking to your beneficiaries that you realise that there are some small adjustments that you need to make. So now, a quick conclusion. A theory of change helps you to organise a process for achieving transformative change through the delivery of a project. It's vital that this process is collaborative with your stakeholders and with your beneficiaries so that you're all working towards the same goal. The theory of change process helps you to develop indicators that you can monitor once you implement the project. These indicators will help you to identify whether you're on track to meet your short, medium and long-term outcomes and, of course, your project vision. Adding a short narrative aspect to your theory of change to tell a story of how your project was developed and to fill in any gaps with regards to evidence and your assumptions is really, really helpful. So this theory of change can then demonstrate your rationale to potential funders so they can have confidence in your project and in your approach. Remember, you should always embed a process such as a feedback loop, which can help you adjust your project once you implement it. Having this feedback loop and this flexibility of mindset will help you to continue to tweak your project so that you make it even better and much more likely to meet your project vision. For anyone who's interested, I'll put some Theory of Change resources in the description box below. And please let me know in the comments section what your experiences have been in developing and using a theory of change. Thank you to all you lovely non-profit people for watching. And if you have an idea about a video you'd like to see, please let me know in the comments below. Have a great week.